Welcome and welcome back. I'm B. Today I'm talking about the movie Presence, a supernatural horror film that had potential but honestly just didn't work for me. I went into this movie expecting something unique, but by the time the credits rolled, I was just sitting there disappointed. I've been seeing a lot of good to great reviews for this movie, but after watching it, I honestly wonder if I got a different version than everyone else. Now, most of this review will be spoiler free, but I will be sharing my spoiler thoughts towards the end. If you want to skip that section, I'll have a timestamp so you can just jump past it. Now let's get into it. Presence is a supernatural horror film directed by Steven Soderbergh, a director known for his more experimental approaches to storytelling. The film follows the Payne family, Rebecca, Chris, and their teenage kids, Chloe and Tyler, who move into a new home for a fresh start. What they don't know is that they're not alone in the house, and this presence, this ghost, is observing everything. The interesting twist here is that the film is told from the perspective of the ghost. Instead of just watching a family get haunted, we're seeing everything from the entity's point of view. That sounds cool on paper, right? A haunted house story flipped on its head. But the question is, does the unique concept translate into an engaging horror experience? For me, the answer is no. So let's talk about one of the biggest issues, and that was the pacing. The movie drags for me, and I'm not just talking about a slow burn horror film where tension builds gradually. This is the kind of slow where you start checking the time, wondering how much longer you have to sit through it. Now, I don't mind slow pacing if it serves a purpose. A film like Hereditary or The Witch takes its time, but there's tension building in every frame. With Presence, nothing really builds, in my opinion. Scenes stretch out longer than they need to, and by the time something does happen, I just didn't care anymore. I kept waiting for that moment that would justify the slow pacing, but it never came. Okay, so let's just say the pacing is slow, fine. A horror movie can still work if it has strong atmosphere and tension, but Present doesn't deliver on that either. There's barely any suspense. I was never on edge, never unsettled, never even mildly creeped out, and that's a problem when your whole movie is centered around a ghost perspective. The cinematography could have done a lot of the heavy lifting here. If we're supposed to be in the shoes of the ghost, I want to feel the eerie presence. Instead, a lot of the scenes just felt empty. There were moments where the film could have leaned into something visually unsettling, but it never fully committed. The end result is a movie that feels like a ghost story, but never actually functions as one. Now let's talk about the acting. I don't think the acting was great, but I also don't know if that's necessarily the actor's fault or more so the script. The performances weren't compelling, but at the same time, the dialogue and the writing didn't give them much to work with. A lot of it felt stiff and unnatural, which made it hard to get invested in the characters. And that's another thing. If I don't care about the people in the movie, why would I care about the haunting? To me, horror works best when you're either invested in the characters or the scares are so strong that it doesn't even matter. But when you have neither, you end up with a forgettable experience. Now, before we get into my overall thoughts, I want to talk about something that stood out to me. So this is your spoiler warning if you haven't seen the movie yet. Throughout the movie, I assumed the ghost was Chloe's best friend since she had just died. But then it's revealed that the ghost was actually Tyler, her brother. That was different from what I was expecting, and I will say that I appreciate the attempt to subvert expectation. The movie does try to explain how this works with the medium character, who says that ghosts experience time differently. That's how Tyler was the ghost all along. He just didn't realize it. The medium also says that ghosts sometimes aren't even sure what their goal is, which plays into Tyler's story. He eventually figures out what his purpose is, and that is to protect his sister from his creepy ass friend, which, yeah, good for him, but it didn't feel like a satisfying revelation to me. The whole thing is interesting in concept, but in execution, I just didn't find it compelling. If this was supposed to be a big emotional or shocking reveal, it didn't land for me. As I was reflecting on this while outlining this review, I realized that in theory, this could have been a really engaging take on the ghost story, but in practice, it just wasn't presented in an interesting way, in my opinion. So with all that being said, what's the takeaway here? Presence had an interesting idea, but the execution just wasn't there for me personally. It lacked tension, the pacing was off, and the performances weren't enough to elevate it, and the scares, if you can even call them that, were non-existent. This movie just didn't leave any impact on me. If anything, it left me annoyed that I spent time and money on it. By the end, I was just sitting there like, that's it? That was the experience? It felt like a movie that was trying to be something deeper, but it didn't know how to get there. And look, I'm all for a creative risk in horror. I'd rather watch a bold, experimental horror film that doesn't fully work than a generic, paint by numbers horror movie. But this wasn't bold or experimental in a way that kept me engaged. It was just boring. And again, seeing so many people praise this movie makes me feel like I watched something completely different. Because if this was supposed to be tense, engaging, or even thought provoking, I missed it. Now, I checked Google recently and I am seeing that the ratings have gone down. I think it's a 2 on Google reviews right now. And on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics seem to love it. It's at an 88% for the critics, but it is at a 52% for the audience. So it seems like people are split on this movie. Alright, now let me rate this movie. I normally rate my movies out of Scream Queens. I gave this movie 1 Scream Queen out of 5. This was just not it for me. Maybe you'll get more out of it than I did, but personally, I was just bored and disappointed. But hey, maybe you saw something I didn't. Let me know in the comments, did Presence work for you? Did the ghost perspective add anything for you, or were you just as let down as I was? And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more horror, sci-fi, and everything in between. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.